Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of The Essential 6, your regular 6-minute update on all things relating to world trade and the economy. I'm Simon Hart, lead international partner at RSM UK. And as ever, I'm joined by Joe Brusuelas, chief economist at RSM US. And Joe, we're making this recording the day after the Biden administration announced a $1.2 trillion agreement on infrastructure investment in the US. So we thought today we'll talk about infrastructure. You okay with that, Joe?
I'm more than happy to talk about that, Simon.
Okay. Now, we're at a time in the economic cycle post-pandemic where businesses are starting to look at their capital investment, their infrastructure investment in terms of digitalizing their businesses. And indeed, RSM UK and RSM US have conducted surveys of middle market business leaders relating to infrastructure. And I think it was quite interesting, Joe, when we looked at some of the survey results, and you can find them on the websites of both RSM UK and US, that 63% of US businesses and 68% of UK businesses felt that the current state of infrastructure was holding back the national economy. Were you surprised by those statistics, Joe?
Not at all. We've heard from our clients over a period of close to a decade that something needed to be done. And what's important here is not just the national economy that's being held back, but the local economy and even their own individual middle market organizations. So that it's very clear that something needed to be done. And the reason why we're talking about this is in the US, we did see the rarest of most things, a bipartisan agreement to increase spending. Now, what's interesting is you look at the number, it's 1.2 trillion, and some would say, well, that's not really going to meet the needs. But when you back that out, you think about it, in the United States, the 50 states, the prefix, if you will, well, they spend total about $170 billion a year, and that number's been rising in the past few years. When you add that in to the one aggressive and very, very ambitious $1.2 trillion series of outlays over 8 years, the net result is $2.5 trillion in infrastructure spending in less than a decade. That's going to help transform the American economy. And it informs our clients that they need to get ahead of the curve here, that things are beginning to change, and that in the post-pandemic era, we expect to see an increase in productivity and a hyper-competitive economy. So if you're out there and you're a mid-market firm, you need to be having conversations about pulling forward your infrastructure investment, specifically around software, equipment, and intellectual property, in addition to the traditional trucks, buildings, and machines. That is going to be the recipe for success in the post-pandemic era.
You mentioned there what middle market business leaders were considering. It's interesting in terms of the survey results that in the UK alone, 63% of the respondents said that the lack of infrastructure investment nationally was holding back their own organization. So, we have the levelling up agenda in the UK. I know, given some of the winter disruptions that happened in the United States, that's been some of the impetus for this bipartisan agreement that you mentioned there, Joe. But it does take a brave business leader to actually make that investment decision right now. I know you're saying it's about pulling it forward, but given where we are in terms of the throes of the pandemic, it's still a brave decision, isn't it?
No, it is. I mean, it is a little bit different for many mid-market companies. Mid-market companies are all about best practices and being a little bit in the rearview mirror. Like they're not early adapters. They like to come second, third, fourth, or fifth, and that's the safe way to go. And we respect and understand that. But the collective shock to the UK economy and the American economy caused by the pandemic will require a bit of a change in terms of how management operates. A little bit more forward-looking, a little bit more courageous, perhaps making different hiring decisions, different people, younger people with different skill sets. And this is going to be the management challenge of our generation, which is how we guide our businesses coming out of the pandemic. And the idea that the governments are looking forward to create the conditions for better growth. And let me show you where the rubber hits the road on that. we economists look at something called the fiscal multiplier. When you do infrastructure, you get a much bigger multiplier. It's about 1.7. That means for every dollar you spend, you'll get 1.7 in return on investment. That really will bolster the overall economy over a decade. This is what's important here. It's going to improve productivity. It's going to lift the living standard of all Englishmen and all Americans. And then it could, if done properly and sustained, lift the growth path of both economies. And I don't have to tell you, after the past 5 years in the post-Brexit environment, this is something that's really needed in the UK. So that as we come out of this, it won't just be the British household, it'll be the British business sector that leads. And that, my friends, is a recipe to smooth out some of the social divisions that we see across both countries and embedded in both economies.
We're on an interesting part of the curve, aren't we, Joe? So look, I mentioned the RSM UK and US surveys. They're available on our websites, rsmuk.com, rsmus.com. Please go and visit those, have a look at the surveys, get in touch if you need any more information. Until next time, Joe, thanks for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in. Goodbye.